The story begins in the endless heart of the Great Plains, beneath a sky that stretches wider than any ocean, where the grass whispers like waves and the wind carries memories older than time. Long before iron rails carved their way across the land, before cities rose from the dust, there existed a nation of riders who ruled this vast wilderness. They called themselves Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, though the world would come to know them by one word that echoed through history: the Sioux. Their tale is one of courage, honor, and survival, of people who live by the rhythm of the earth and the call of the buffalo, and of warriors whose names still thunder across the plains they once claimed as their own. Before the Sioux became lords of the open grasslands, their ancestors lived deep within the northern woodlands of Minnesota and Wisconsin, near shimmering lakes and dense forests where the air smelled of pine and river water. They were a woodland people, hunters, gatherers, and fishers, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of the seasons. But fate, as always, moves with the wind. As European colonists and rival tribes armed with guns began to push westward, the Sioux followed the sunset, leaving behind the forest for the boundless horizon of the Great Plains. It was there that they found a new world and a new destiny. The Great Plains was a place of staggering beauty and brutal test, an open empire grass where the sky met the earth in an unbroken line. The Sioux adapted swiftly, and the land rewarded their courage. They became one with the buffalo herds that roamed in uncountable numbers, learning their movements, their moods, their cycles. Then came the horse, a gift that changed everything. To the Sioux, the horse was not merely a beast of burden, but a sacred partner, a living extension of their spirit. They called it Schwenkawacking, the sacred dog, and through it, they became legends, with horses beneath them. Sioux hunters could ride like the wind, their lances glinting in the sun, their bodies painted with the colors of lightning and sky. They learned to strike swiftly, to vanish as ghosts, and to live as freely as the storms that swept across their lands. The teepees of their families dotted the horizon like clouds made of hide, each marked with symbols that told the stories of dreams, victories, and visions. Their lives were guided by deep spiritual reverence for the land, for the animals, and for Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, who governed all life and connected all things. Their society was structured yet fluid, a balance between individual valor and collective wisdom. Chiefs were not born into power. They earned it through courage, generosity, and the respect of their people. The tribe's council guided decisions through consensus, ensuring every voice mattered. For the Sioux, the highest virtues were bravery, generosity, and honor, values that bound them together even in times of hardship. To die bravely was not a tragedy. It was to live forever in the memory of the people. Every warrior, woman, and child grew up with a clear understanding. Their life belonged not only to themselves, but to the circle of all things. By the early 1800s, the winds of change began to sweep across the plains. Traders and trappers arrived from the east, bringing metal tools, whiskey, and guns, small pieces of a growing foreign world. The Sioux watched as the white man's hunger spread like wildfire. Then came soldiers, surveyors, and settlers. The land, once endless and free, began to shrink beneath the boots of men who believed they could own the earth. The buffalo herds thinned. The sacred rivers became highways for steamboats, and the Sioux saw that a storm was gathering, one that would test everything they stood for. At first, they fought with restraint, protecting their hunting grounds and families through small skirmishes and raids. But soon, their patience gave way to defiance. The Sioux understood that the new world sought not to live beside them, but to erase them. From this realization rose leaders whose courage and spirit would make them immortal. Among them stood Red Cloud, the cunning strategist who outwitted the United States Army and forced them to abandon their forts during Red Cloud's war. Then came Sitting Bull, the spiritual visionary whose dreams foretold victory and whose courage united the tribes against an empire. And there was Crazy Horse, the quiet, unyielding warrior who fought not for glory but for the soul of his people. Their struggle reached its fiery peak on a summer's day in June 1876, beside a river called Little Bighorn. On that day, two destinies collided. General George Armstrong Custer, leading the 7th Cavalry, believed he faced a small encampment. He rode forward with arrogance and pride, unaware that he was about to meet the combined might of the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, the largest gathering of Plains warriors ever assembled. As the sun climbed high, the ground began to shake beneath the thunder of thousands of hooves. The Sioux struck with precision, their arrows and bullets cutting through the air like rain. The battle was fierce, fast, and final. By sunset, Custer and his men lay still among the grass, and the plains echoed with victory songs. But that triumph came with a terrible shadow. The United States would not forgive. What followed was a relentless campaign of retribution. The army burned villages, slaughtered herds, and imprisoned families. The buffalo, the Sioux's lifeblood, were hunted nearly to extinction, not for meat, but to break the will of the Plains tribes. Slowly, the Sioux were forced onto reservations, their freedom fenced, their traditions outlawed. Yet even in captivity, their spirit refused to die. They continued to pray in secret, to dance when no one watched, to whisper the old songs in the darkness. Tragedy struck again in 1890, when the ghost of resistance rose through a new spiritual movement known as the Ghost Dance, a sacred ritual that promised a return of the buffalo and the restoration of the old world. The U.S. government saw it as a rebellion. Fear turned into violence at a frozen place called Wounded Knee, where soldiers opened fire on unarmed Sioux men, women, and children. Hundreds were killed. The snow turned red. The wind carried the cries of the dying across the plains. It was a final blow, the end of an era, the silencing of a nation's voice. Yet even in their grief, the Sioux endured. The fire within them could not be extinguished. The strength of the Sioux was not born of conquest, but of understanding. They lived by a philosophy that the world was a circle, everything connected, everything sacred. The circle symbolized life, death, and rebirth, the sun and the sky, the dance of the seasons, the turning of time. They believed every creature, from the eagle soaring above to the buffalo thundering below, carried a spirit of its own. This belief created balance, a respect for all existence. They hunted only what they needed. They gave thanks for every life taken, and they believed that every soul, human or animal, returned to the circle of life. Their customs and ceremonies reflected this harmony. The sun dance, the most sacred of all, was a ritual of pain, endurance, and renewal. Warriors would pierce their flesh, tethering themselves to the central pole, dancing and suffering for the good of their people. It was not a spectacle of cruelty, but an act of devotion, proof that the spirit could rise above the body. Through the grass dance, they celebrated the renewal of the earth. Through the ghost dance, they reached out to ancestors in the unseen world. These traditions, outlawed by the U.S. government for decades, survived in whispers and shadows, and when the time was right, they returned to the light. The Sioux were also masters of teaching through stories. Elders passed down wisdom by the fire, stories of the trickster Iktomi, of the creation of the world, of how the stars came to be. Every tale carried a lesson about humility, courage, or the power of nature. Their oral traditions became the heartbeat of their culture, ensuring that even when books and laws erased their names, their spirits would continue to speak. Children learned to ride before they could read, to listen to the wind before they learned to speak. A young boy's path to manhood began with a vision quest, a journey into solitude, hunger, and prayer, where he sought a dream that would define his destiny. When a spirit came to him, a bird, a bear, a thunderstorm, it became his lifelong protector, his sacred power. The Sioux warrior was not just a fighter. He was a protector of harmony. He went to war not for greed, but to defend his people, his land, and the balance of the world. Before battle, he painted his face with sacred colors: red for courage, black for victory, yellow for lightning and strength. His weapons were simple but deadly: a lance, a bow, a tomahawk, and later, rifles traded by whites. Yet his true weapon was his spirit. The Sioux measured bravery not by kills, but by counting coup, touching an enemy in battle and living to tell it. To touch your foe and spare him was the purest form of valor. It was a warrior's laughter in the face of death. Even in times of victory, humility remained sacred. Power, they believed, was not possessed but borrowed, given by the Great Spirit for a time, and taken back when pride grew too heavy. So they gave generously, they shared food and horses. They honored their elders, and they treated guests with reverence. Their generosity was their wealth, their unity, their shield. But as the old world faded, a new kind of battle began, not with weapons, but with memory. The 20th century brought new generations of Sioux who refused to forget. They became teachers, artists, and activists, carrying the same warrior spirit into modern struggles. From the American Indian Movement stand at Wounded Knee in 1973 to the resistance against the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock in 2016, the Sioux continue to fight, not for vengeance, but for respect, for justice, for the right to exist on their own terms. Their voices became the echo of their ancestors, their courage the living heartbeat of their people. Today, the Sioux Nation lives across 6 major reservations: Pine Ridge, Rosebud, Standing Rock, Cheyenne River, Crow Creek, and Lower Brule, each a living fragment of the Great Circle. Life is not easy there. Poverty, isolation, and historical trauma still linger. Yet amidst it all, the Sioux endure. Their children learn the language once silenced by schools. Their elders still gather to tell the old stories. The buffalo herds, once nearly extinct, roam again under Sioux protection, a symbol of renewal of hope. And through it all, their spirit remains unbroken. The Sioux remind the world that strength is not domination. It is balance. That freedom is not something given. It is something lived fiercely and proudly, even in hardship. Their wisdom teaches that the land does not belong to us. We belong to it. They lived and died by that truth, and in doing so became eternal. If you walk the Great Plains at dusk, you can still feel them. The wind hums through the tall grass like a distant song. The shadows stretch long and golden, and for a moment, the earth feels alive with old power. The thunder of hooves echoes faintly in the distance, as if the Sioux warriors still ride across the horizon, their silhouettes blending with the sunset. The land remembers, the sky remembers, and the spirit of the Sioux rides on, untamed, unforgotten, and eternal. This is their story, the story of the Sioux, the most powerful tribe of the Great Plains. A story of warriors, dreamers, and survivors. A story of a people who refused to vanish, who carried their honor through centuries of loss and struggle, who taught the world what true strength means. It is a story that belongs not only to the past, but to all who walk this land today. Because the Sioux are not gone. They live in the wind, in the song of the eagle, in the echo of the drums that still beat across the plains of America. If this story touched you, carry it forward. Let their names be spoken. Let their history be known. Like this video, share their legacy, and subscribe to USA Tribes, a channel where history lives and the voices of America's First Nations are never silenced. Because the past is not behind us. It rides beside us still, beneath the same endless sky.